Hey, everybody, welcome back. I'm Emily Moyer, and it is almost impossible to believe that I think it's been a year since I've done a show with the Crimis, but I think it has been. They're back. I've been wanting to do a show with them for a while, and then all of a sudden the thing arose. It was like, aha, now we have it. I know what to do. Krys, Steve, welcome back. It's nice to see you guys again.
Thanks, Emily.
Hello, Emily.
Can't believe it's been a year.
Always a pleasure. You're looking a year younger, though, so we're good there.
You look really good.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm having some sort of like sympathy pain with Nadal or something today. I have some weird shoulder pain, right? Some weird shoulder pain that came out of nowhere and is pressing farther and is making it hard for me to breathe. I didn't take the pokeroonie, so it can't be, it can't be that.
Maybe you just need to visit the chiropractor.
Well, maybe. I don't know. We'll see. So
Krys too is having hip issues the last few months. So she's been hobbling around the garden like Walter Brennan.
Yeah, really. I feel like my grandmother. But I've been doing the chiropractor, and slowly it's coming back. So,
but it's old. It's from an old. It seems to be from an old accident from 2004.
In the car.
I have no idea what this is. This just started this morning. I had like a tightness in my upper back. And I asked Laura to walk on my back like I normally do, and I have a tightness in the upper back, and that sort of went away. And then like a little after that, like an area up there started hurting, and it feels like something's poking in. I don't know. So I don't know if it's just from when she stepped. I have no idea. Anyway, I'm assuming that it'll just go away overnight, like most things do. So.
Nice shower.
Anywho, so here's like what sort of jumped up and was like, aha, it's the time. So as everyone knows, I have this ongoing obsession with the quatrefoil, or the 4-lobe shape, or the inverse of the Maltese cross, or the Knights Templar cross, or whatever anybody wants to refer to it as, right? I've been hitting that button pretty hard for, pretty much as long as I've been doing all of this stuff. And always looking for sort of just so people know what I'm talking about here, right? Like this is the quatrefoil here. When you connect it to many of them, if it's the sort of positive space, right? Or what it looks one way, if it's the negative space, it looks that way. But they're all considered sort of the quatrefoil. And I guess how I first ever saw these designs when I was younger was part of like mid-century modern design, right? They have the sort of concrete masonry blocks and whatnot, but also like you will see sometimes some stuff like this in mid-century modern or Art Deco kind of stuff. And
it actually looks like an Amish quilt.
It does, right? It's funny how everything old becomes new again, right? So I think those were my first exposures to stuff that looked like that. Was that my family, lots of people in my family had artworks or things like that looked like this, right? And the deeper I have gone into psychedelia and, metaphysics and whatnot, the more and more this design, this shape or whatever has shown itself to me. And to the point where I consider it to be like the wallpaper of reality, like everything else is sort of projected from and onto that, right? Kind of thing. And I've had a number of like very interesting exchanges and experiences with whatever sort of that structure or the energy behind it is. And I've talked about it for years. It comes up over and over, right? And then when I was cleaning out the garage at my grandmother's house where I was living in Los Angeles, the very last box that I cleaned out in the garage had these weird metal things in it. And I was like, oh, that's funny. It looks like the shape, right? And there's a couple of there's we have a couple that are like this. And we also have a couple that are like this, that are just two of them. So it's like the diagonal part of that right there. It's not this way. And then there's a few single ones at the home in Los Angeles, right? And it was in the very last box, which is weird because when I cleaned out my garage, what I found in the very last box was like my mom's documents from when she worked at Psychon and the whole connection to Tavistock. So there's something about the last box in the garage in my family that holds the key to unlocking the mysteries of the ages or whatever, right? But these were there. And I thought, oh, that's so cool. Like this thing this shape that I'm obsessed with, like my grandmother was into it also. And, for some reason I was thinking she had these things made, like for her, maybe she was envisioning them as well, or maybe she like was trying to make some sort of family symbol or sigil or crest or something like that. So I was telling myself these stories, right? And then I had a mushroom trip then I had a mushroom trip where there was all, like I said, the entire trip is wallpapered with this stuff. And it was weird, like in the spaces that are like the almond shaped spaces here, eyes were looking back at me. So there would be nothing, there would be just like colors and other things in this space, but in the almond shapes, there were eyes looking back at me. So it was almost like I was looking through to other realities, this diamond portion in the middle, and the people that are in the other realities were looking back through the almond shapes at me, and I could see their eyes. And of course, I saw eyes of people I've known throughout time. And then at a certain point, I realized, oh no, they're all my own eyes, and it's me looking at myself from outside of time. But what I kind of decided on was that my grandmother had left me a pair of third eye binoculars, right? Psychedelic binoculars. So I could look at her, right, on the other side, and she could look back at me. And it was perfect because this one goes right on the third eye, right? So that was the story that settled on. And everyone thought that was funny and liked it and whatever. And we made this is our insignia for our business and whatnot. It's on our business cards. It's on the door at our office. And
Can I just cut in just 1 second?
Yeah.
Because it fits perfectly. This is a book by Anne Marie Schimmel.
Yeah.
The Mystery of Numbers.
Yeah.
Great book. Goes through all the numbers. And at the end of her chapter on the number 4, she quotes she spent a lot of time in Turkey. So she's gone now, but she was a brilliant scholar of world religions. And so she found so there was a Turkish saying called Sizi dört gözle bekledim. Dort is 4 in Turkish, and it means I waited for you with 4 eyes.
Oh, wow.
Your lover, you're waiting. I've been waiting for you impatiently with 4 eyes.
I like it.
Probably has a deeper meaning than that.
Okay. So,
very interesting.
So this became hugely important. We decided it would be kind of a cool like nod at my grandmother and family lineage and multidimensionality and all of this kind of stuff. So we made that. And we have one of these at the office because we have a couple of these. And so Laura had a client come in one time. I think it was like the first time this client had come in. And she's like, oh, she's like, do you do Ikebana? She's like, that's a kenzan. And Laura's like, huh? What are you talking about? Right. And so she explained to Laura what it was and then described this sort of other plate that would have a bunch of sort of sharp, pokey needles sticking up that you would sit this on top of. And Laura's like, oh yeah, those are at the house.
Oh, you sit that on
that they were connected, right? We found several of those around the house as well, but they weren't in the box that I found. They were already out of the box or whatever, right? So she brought hers in. She has some smaller versions of this, right? And she sort of explained to Laura what it was. And so I decided that day, and when Laura did it, I was like, I can run back to Krys and tell her something that I know that I don't know if she knows, right?
Something you don't know.
I know something you don't know because I've shown you this before and you never told me that was part of the.
I'd never seen it. I had never seen it before you exposed me to it. And I don't know why I didn't buy one when you sent me the link. It was like, oh, they're so cool. I should get one. But this is what you're describing. In English, in America, they just call it a pin holder.
Correct.
But in Ikebana, it's called a kenzan, Kenzan, kenzan.
Yes.
So I guess they both have the same name. They have the same function.
I can tell you why you didn't buy it when I sent it to you.
Why?
Because at this point, they're very rare and very expensive.
But I saw replicants.
So I went
Philip K. Dick here.
I went looking this morning.
I thought I saw some online. No,
I went looking to try and find it. And first of all, it's hard to find it by word search, right? But the only one for sale that I could find was this one on Etsy that was $74.95.
Right.
Huh.
right? And that's it. And there's one available, one left. And that's it. There, I couldn't find it for sale
Huh.
anywhere else. I can find the pin cushion thing,
And what are they? Kenzan?
Yeah.
right?
Handmade shippo, 3 circle. Okay, so I'll look up.
I
3
searched,
circle.
I searched it in all the word combinations you can imagine. This is the
So
only
annoying.
one I could find,
Really?
right? So maybe I should, so mine might become worth something. I have quite a few of them. So maybe I'll gift you one.
Oh, there you go.
Chris. Maybe I'll gift you one, because apparently other than this one, I'm sitting on the
Wow.
mode of these, right?
Huh.
But I thought that, okay, so then it all began to make sense, right? Why my grandmother would have this, because my grandmother is obsessed with the Orient. She spent lots and lots of time there.
Really?
And these are the kinds of things, like I was trying, I mean, my grandmother was a very interesting, very progressive lady. And when I say progressive, I do mean it kind of
In
in
the
both
classic sense.
well, probably in both sense. She was very progressive in terms of like, but I'd say both ways. Like she was always wanting to learn new things and assimilate more things into, you know, her own understanding of reality and whatnot. But also like, you know, she was like you know, she had a little SJW in her, right? But it was like not the kind, she'd think these people today were ridiculous, right? She'd think this was ridiculous. But at the time that she was doing it, it was like when it actually probably needed to be done a little bit, right? Like she was the first woman who was the president of the board at the temple and that kind of stuff, right? Like she was always on that cutting edge of things. My grandmother was very smart. She went to Oxford when she was in her 80s because she'd never had a chance to go to college when she was younger. You know, so she went to Oxford in her 80s to take Yiddish for one summer because that was a
She could. Yeah.
because she could, right? But this would be the kind of thing she'd get obsessed with. Like she would go to the Orient, to China or to Japan or somewhere else, you know, and she would find some artist doing something she liked and she would decide it was the best thing ever and she'd buy half their shit and take a lesson from them and whatever, right? So it made sense to me. And she has these really gorgeous cabinets in the living room that are also from the Orient that have this painted on them all over it, right? Like in very tiny gold paint.
Really?
Right? And so it was obviously something she was appealing to her and attracted to for a long time. This made more sense. As much as I know my grandmother's progressive, and I think there are things about my grandmother that probably like my father doesn't understand and that I might be better equipped to unpack or whatever. I don't think she did mushrooms, and I don't know if she was communicating to me through my mushroom trip from the other side through the binoculars, though I really like that story. And if that turns out to be true, that will delight me. This made more sense for the woman that I knew when she was alive and I was a little girl, right? And so I thought, well, wow, if this is like, these are the only ones she had, there wasn't ones of other shapes. So it seemed like it was very important for some reason that the flowers be arranged this way. And considering our previous conversations about Gabrielle Kellerman and projective geometry and sort of the emergence of a flower from seed to bud to open, all that kind of stuff, I thought, okay, like if the actual like thing the flower does is sacred, then sort of the positioning of the flower once it's done that is also got to be sacred. And it's similar that the same geometry is involved with both. So I have to talk to Krys about this. Now it's time for a show. And I called you and I was like, let's do the show.
That's right.
So what say you about, am I understanding this correctly? What say you about my discoveries here?
Well, it seemed what's going through my mind as you're talking, and it seemed like it was a chance discovery, finding the last box. That would be a great name for a book. I think you had been absorbing that pattern your whole life. If your grandmother had furniture in her home that had that embossed on it.
I'll take a picture when I'm there of it and link to it, because I'm not sure if I'll post this show before I go or after I arrive back in Los Angeles, but I'll show, and that's been there for most of my life, right? And she's had lots of, I think these have been around the house for most of my life. Yeah.
And so you've been absorbing that image all your life, and not on a conscious level. It's just been always part of your DNA almost as you were growing up, right? And so there's the root for the seed for your interest in it, and it's blossomed out. And of course, all of this has, the geometries have great significance in all of the material world. That's how everything comes into being. They come in through, everything comes in through vortices.
Mm-hmm.
So you've got a vortex, and a lot of these patterns embed vortices in them.
Mm-hmm.
Like when you spin them or when you look at them in a particular way. And a vortex will either make something come into manifestation, and then when you like unscrew it, it goes out of manifestation. It's like a screw going into the wall. You screw it in, that's a vortex. A screw is just a vortex.
Yeah.
And then you unscrew it. So it goes into manifestation and comes back, goes in Sanskrit, it would be called pratiprasava, is return to the origin.
Yeah.
All right. So you go, there's manifestation, and then there's this dissolution, and you go back into pratiprasava is the process of going into dissolution. So that's what the geometry is so elegant in portraying. And we don't necessarily need to understand it on a conscious level, but you can bet that your subconscious level is connecting with it all the time, constantly. That's why they use all these symbols in the dark arts, because it works on you, whether you know it or not. So the quatrefoil does not show up, to my experience, in the Ikebana. It's most of the Ikebana arrangements are based on triangles, on 3.
That's what, when I read about Ikebana, I read a couple of interesting articles and then some sort of summaries on the overall philosophy about it. And it seems that it's mostly on scaling triangles, correct?
Right, exactly. Okay. Exactly. I think I even have some, like when I did my class, I had some handouts. This is a good example. And that's what this arrangement is based on. You can see the triangle right there.
Mm-hmm.
That's pretty easy to see. I'll try to hold this up so it's readable to the camera. But there you've got the diagram, and then the bottom one is the overhead.
Yes.
And that's from the workbook that I had when I was studying with Tomiko Bayless on Long Island. And that's the basis of most of the arrangements.
Oh, by the way, Krys has a black belt in Ikebana. She can kill with a pistol.
So, but I think that it makes sense with the scaling triangle, because if you just take out the rounded edges, this is a triangle.
Yes.
Right?
Yes, you've got 3 there.
Right. And you can find a lot of triangles within it. So there's like the bigger one, and then there's like a smaller one in each spot. So I think it's just different ways you can arrange the triangles within the triangle, right? And you're looking at it and it looks like circles, but no, you can find the angles within it.
Yeah.
And I've got another one. Okay, to cut you off.
No.
I've got another one. I don't know if you can look up quickly something called the triple tau, T-A-U.
Triple tau. All right. This word tau has come up many times in many contexts.
Right. So tau is a version of the T. It's also deeply.
Oh yeah. Okay. So this is exactly it, but just more angular, right?
So, let's see if you have it. Yeah. So this is goes deep into like John Dee's kind of work.
Which
Yes.
one do you like?
Right. It doesn't matter. That black one in the middle is good. That'll work too. Anyway, the point is that you have 3 T's, but what is implicit in them is in the middle, there's a 4th T. Right?
Oh, I see.
Right. So you got you got 2 T's opposite direction, 1 T going vertical, 2 opposite horizontally, but the long lines of each of the T's form another T.
The bars. Yeah.
So what you have in Ikebana, but you have to look for it. So the 4th T, the mystic part of it, is implied or inherent in the design itself.
Okay, so that's almost like so it's like what you said about the implication, right, is very similar to like with this here. I was showing this on the quatrefoil patterns earlier. let me just pull back to the one that I was thinking of right prior, right here, right? So these things are the floral arrangement when they're just showing you 3, but there's obviously 4 circles to the pattern of the quatrefoil, but it's implied just in the same way you're saying that one is implied, Steve, on, I don't know if I can switch windows and you see it, but just like what you said about how the 4th one is implied, right?
Right. And so if you're looking at any 3, because the number 4, of course, is the number of both time and space. Right. Right. 4 directions.
Yes.
Right. The world
4
is divided in
seasons.
that way, because that's how we, the world of experience, the world of time, especially, the 4 seasons, you've got the days divided into sunrise, sunset, midnight, and noon. It just goes on. And the 4, and then also in many traditions, you have the 4 times of life. The Sanskrit one, of course, is interesting. It's called Artha, Kama, Dharma, and Moksha. Artha is where you gain your wealth, live your life. Kama means desire, fulfilling your desires. And then Dharma is where you learn the law of the sacred law of existence. And then Moksha is the liberation, the end of your life, where you give all that up and devote yourself to the liberation of yourself from the desires and all that. So all that is just shows how the moon, everything gets divided up into 4 time-wise, and then of course then again space-wise. And of course the 4, the square being the 2-dimensional of the cube, but being the most solid of all the of all the geometries. And the square is always representative of Earth in the circle of heaven.
So this is the symbol of the Royal Arch Masonry, right? So like this
is it? Huh.
Yeah, that's what this says. So the Royal Arch Masons, right? They have like their own special symbol, but you can look and it's kind of like if you take this apart in a couple of ways, it's like different ways. So what I'm starting to understand, and I don't want to say all because I'm sure there's some exceptions to things, right? But like they have a Jewish one, right? They have all different kinds of orders of this. But it seems like all of these secret societies are just different ways of arranging the same shape. It's like a more angular one, a softer one, or whatever. How I sort of started to consider it that way was like I was here in Austin after Robert's thing, the first year we did it, right? Templars Cross flask. And we were at a bookstore and there was a flask that had a Templar's cross on it. But when I first approached it, it was called like holy water. Where is it? Let me see if I can find the one I'm thinking of.
And just to back up what you said about the Mason. So and I'm not sure if it was this design or another one, but in other words, to prove you were a Mason, every Mason back when they were operative Masons building cathedrals, you would have a part of that design as your own personal sigil.
Yes. Yeah.
And a Mason would know that would fit as part of the overall design, and that's how you'd be recognized as a real Mason.
Correct. Yes. So that I think that was what my instinct when I was saying that, like maybe my grandmother was trying to incorporate this into some kind of family crest or personal symbol, right? It was that kind of thing, right? Like, okay, so we were in the bookstore and there was a display cabinet and I was coming at it from an angle. So from the angle I was coming at it, it looked just like my 4-lobe shape. I'm like, oh, cool. Look at that. A flask with a 4-lobe shape on it. No, what better to drink my booze from? I'm going to go buy that. But then when I looked at it head on, I saw, oh no, this is the Templar's cross. Right. And so one can decide which is the negative space, right? Is the negative space the Templar's cross, or is the negative space the 4 lobes or whatever? But this is all about what you were talking about, right? Like one representing time, one representing space. Maybe they're switchable, right? Maybe they're interchangeable that way. Like I'm to the place where like, I think sometimes the different sects or the different secret societies, they're using, like some are more focused on space and arranging time around space as the axis, and others are more focused on a temporal axis. and arrangement of space around that, right? So it's, do you lead with time or do you lead with space, and how do you pull those things together? And I think the way one represents these symbols, right? They're all seemingly different iterations of the same thing. And then if they choose to do it with a more like harsh and angular looking thing, right? Like what this is, or whether they choose to do it with something that is more soft and flower looking, right? They're all talking about the same thing. And it's basically like something coming from what seems to be nothing and then returning back into nothingness at the end of its time being something, right? Mm-hmm. Or sort of like emerging out of the void, becoming something and then disappearing back into the void, or the snake eating its tail, or, you know, emergence and decay, or however people, there's like a million ways that you can say the sort of same thing, right? And so
that's exactly what flowers do.
That's exactly what flowers do. And so this is at the same time that, right, you know, that we had made this, I had made this sort of, you know, awareness after she came in and told us about the flower stuff. I've broken this symbol apart every which way. And also we've had a lot of flowers in the house. Laura really likes flowers, right? And a lot of times when we get the flowers, they're not fully bloomed. And it's amazing to watch the way they change shape very quickly. Yeah. And then the way they wither and decay. And it's always this sort of process of like, are you fucking serious? There is not a fucking time I'm not recording a show and someone doesn't knock on the door. No one ever, hold on a second. Okay. Sorry about that, guys. Those who watch on a regular basis know that this has become a frequent occurrence. Is about 20 minutes into a show, right? There'll be a knock on the door. Anywho.
Interrupt us.
Yeah. Okay. So, where was I with this? Okay. So I've looked at this shape from a million perspectives: the psychedelic perspective, the time-space perspective, sound, light, all of this kind of stuff. It shows, you know, that's also, you know, that Templar's cross shape is also what it looks like in the creation of a light photon. Have you seen that video?
Yeah. Yes. I think, well, not the video, but I've seen images.
Right. So this
has that sort of same thing. Mm-hmm.
So this shows up everywhere. So to me, it is how like obvious that what it is this is how anything comes into being and then how it collapses back in on itself. But this would also be the mechanics or the metaphysics of time travel or dimensional travel if it exists, right? Mm-hmm. And so it's fascinating to me. I mean, and if you really look at Gabriel Kellerman's stuff, which we talked about last time, like that is basically what he is saying. Like the highest physics in the world are a copy of the most simple, you know, kind of thing in the world. And
because that's all they can do is copy.
Right. That's all they can.
They're not capable of creativity.
Correct.
Well, one of the images coming to mind is like when you said Gabriel, especially, I'm thinking like Gabriel's horn.
Yeah, that's
so
totally.
The angels' horns and the trumpets of their announcing, they're messengers from the other dimensions, right? And that's a vortex.
Literally blowing reality into existence.
Yep.
Right. And using those same dynamics for it. So
and light is deeply hooked into it, as you just said.
Right.
And you know, and if you look at like the old Islamic buildings where they were not allowed to use images of you know, humans and things like that, they did some animals, but on the entrance to, say, the caravan side or the mosques or tombs, you know, they have those little stalactite kind of projections coming down, right? And
Are you familiar with them? It's like a mini alcove, but there's
what's it called? How would I look at it?
Maqam, M-A-Q-A-M.
M-A-Q-A-M.
And it's depicting the light coming into the world.
So it's the movement
it's usually in an alcove
of light into solid manifestation.
Okay, this is just showing me music notes.
That's a Macarna. Shit, I can't remember.
Okay, wait, is this it? Is this it? Hold on a second. I found one thing that I think is what you're asking me to look for. This?
Not quite, no.
Okay.
It's not Maqam,
No.
it's I'm sorry.
Okay.
But it's important. It's Macarna, M-A-Q-U-A-R-N-A. Try that.
M-A-Q.
I'm sorry. If not, I can
No
grab a
worries.
book in a hurry.
Oh yeah, this is it. Okay. Okay, Mukarn, as I see it. I got it.
So
Okay.
beautiful.
Wow, it is beautiful. So I have, yes, I love this. I see this.
It's very trippy.
Why do I see this when I'm tripping, Steve?
Right, because you are tuning, sorry, you go.
No. There you go.
Yeah,
Look
right.
at that.
So this is a depiction of light coming into being. So the origin of all our experience of solidarity is this movement of light into manifestation. And this is what they're depicting. And so what's so amazing about the art of it is that they're depicting light in stone.
Yeah.
You know?
Pull one of these out, one of the more complex ones, so that you can really appreciate what's going on here. Look at that.
Yep.
It also reminds me of the cells. Oh, that's a good one, bottom right, in a beehive.
Yeah. I mean, I have seen these before, but I'd never seen these, at least not attentively or knowingly, before I had done mushrooms. I did mushrooms before I ever saw these, but I saw these when I was in my mushroom trip, right?
That's interesting.
Totally.
And it begs the question of the people who designed these originally.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Well, I mean, here's like someone's graph
Oh,
of
nice.
what the design of that is. And this looks pretty much like when I know Steve has done mushrooms. Have you done them, Krys?
No, I never have.
Okay. So when you if you close your eyes, or even if you do enough of them and your eyes are open, you'll look at something, or you're closing your eyes and you're imagining a scene, and you see the thing, the normal thing. Like, let's just say you were looking at an ocean, a beach with whatever, right? But there'd be this like imprint on it that would be geometry, and it's like this kind of stuff. Right. Like,
Right.
And then you zoom in closer and closer. And then sort of behind that is where you kind of find like what I call base, or the wallpaper, which is always in my case, the quatrefoil stuff behind it. But on top of it is this. And then there's these really exquisite colors that are super bright and almost colors that you only ever see, like they're almost impossible to capture in real life. And then all these tiny little detail, right? Like
I would imagine that would just bring you to tears.
I don't want it to stop, right? Like I want to keep looking at that for the rest of my life, because I'm afraid if I stop looking, it won't be there. I'll never get to see it again, right? And so, but like what's crazy about it is, like, let's say in my trip, I'm imagining a man's face. Right? When I zoom in on the man's face in like the crease, there'll be that kind of decor, like in the, right? Like you won't see it from far. It's just his face. But the farther in you go, it's like, why is his face made up of tiny little things you would draw with colored pencils, right? Like, but not normal pores. Like it looks like this shit, right? And that's where you get some of the idea that's behind like some of the Alex Gray stuff. When you look at some of his, right?
Or some of the nicer ayahuasca art.
Pull out that red one.
Oh, that was one we saw before. You can actually build these. It's not that difficult.
Yes.
I mean, you can see like the simple pieces that it's made up of, but when you put a lot of them together and you put all this, I mean, look at that.
I want to make that. I did see that. It's a tutorial on how to make it out of cardboard.
Oh, wow.
That red one.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
Let's do look at that. I mean, I could look at this shit all day, right? And what's crazy to me is that my own mind, not knowing about this stuff, still knew how to like color that for me to look at when I was high.
Right. And that's because, it's integral to all of us.
Oh my God.
To all of our experience.
Like
this is part of all of our experience.
There you go. There you go.
It's just layered over with centuries of dross.
Oh, look at this. Somebody's making a skyscraper on those principles.
Well, nice try, but it's really ugly.
Right? Yeah, but I mean, that's what they're doing right now with all this modern stuff.
I don't like it.
Okay.
The beauty, the softness, the eloquence of it, the transmission of beauty gets lost in those hard steel, chrome. I don't like it.
Well, it does, except for one thing, right? Because I spent a lot of time, there's a lot of these kinds of buildings here in Austin, right? And what's really interesting, all those buildings have mirrored glass exteriors. So the reflection, like reality, is reflected in all those angles. And because there's all these angles, each reflection is slightly different. So
it's kaleidoscopic.
Yes. right? So like there's this, yes, I agree.
I'm on board with the concept. I'm not on board with the execution.
Correct.
Because when I look at it, I recoil and I shrink. But when I look at the Islamic art and the structures from centuries ago, I'm uplifted. I'm just like, I'm spellbound.
Well, what feels like to me is that like the people who are building these buildings, they don't know what they're doing. It is creating an effect that is kind of like that, what you're talking about. But what's missing is the intention and the awareness of the person building.
The sacred principle is missing. And what I see is like an MK ultra fractured personality. That's what I see. It's like, we've completely fractured you, and we're giving this back to you in a distorted form.
I agree with
giving
you.
This sacred principle that is uplifting for all of humanity, and we're going to put a spin on it that reflects back to you like a schizophrenic split.
So what would be completely different? Like, I understand that life moves on and things progress, and we do things different ways, and we shouldn't, although everyone is, you're obviously, Steve, much more fond of the past than the future. Someone like my friend Jeff is more interested in the future than in the past, or whatever it is, right? But there's a way there. I think there would be a sacred way to carry that through.
It would be
to a more modern sensibility. And what I would say with that would be is like, let's say someone who was a descendant of someone who built one of those original things, right? And fully understood like the ethos or the spiritual aspect that was being carried through in that is a tradition in their family or their lineage. And they were to come to, they moved to America when they're a kid and they grow up here and they love this city. They love this city. And so they, with intention and as the work of their life, decided they're going to build a modern building that in its thing will reflect every beautiful thing they think is in the city. So they'll make sure it's built somewhere where like the reflection of their favorite, tree in Austin or their favorite place to sit on the lake, their other favorite building or whatever, the lawn where they were sitting when they had their first kiss or whatever, that this building has a square for each one of these locations or places that they have a memory at or whatever.
And I'm on board with that. That's great. If it's coming from a sacred place, from a place of knowledge and a place that's going to uplift the human spirit and elevate, it's recognizable. Yeah. So I've come across modern architecture that I'm like, okay, I'm not crazy about modern art. Well, I don't even like modern art, but architecture, I find it grates on my nervous system. Mm-hmm. But if I come across one that has been, as you described, thoughtfully done with knowledge and with a mind toward uplifting, you can tell the difference because your body goes into resonance with that. Whatever you're seeing, whatever you're experiencing, your body is going into resonance with. So yes, there is a way to bring it into manifestation and bring it into the society that has sacred qualities to it.
Well, and it's not that, and also,
that I don't eschew.
It's the awareness of the people participating in the erection of it as well, right? So back in those times, I'm sure that whoever built those had help, but each person who was helping knew what they were doing, understood why it was being done, and was somehow connected to the person whose idea it was, or who was the originator of the right? Maybe. Now you have these things are so big, and it's just, they just hire someone to come in, and they don't even understand
money.
Well, it's also all about look at my building.
Bling and money.
Well, Steve, just to be fair, I'm sure back in these times it was also about look at my building. But to be fair,
I could say,
not to the same extent. Though.
Yes, but again, things like the cathedrals in France, they're all unsigned. There are no architects known for them.
Okay.
Massive. More stone moved than in all of Egypt during this particular.
I didn't know that all those are unsigned and that people don't know.
They would just have stained glass of people, and they would have, sort of propaganda where, the emperor would be like with a shovel.
Right.
But either way, you don't know who designed them. And they all said, well, actually, because they're all students of the 7 liberal arts and the ruler of the 7 liberal arts is Mary. that they all attributed the fact that they are able to create, the largest spaces ever generated to an inspiration from her. So that's the tradition.
Gotcha.
And this gets back to some of what you're saying too, that all of this comes from all the traditions that are all petering out at this moment in this cycle, right? Whether it's the beautiful Islamic tradition, whether it's the Christian tradition, the art of it is all on the wane, right? It's all on the way out, and we don't even know half of the principles that these people 500 years ago, or whatever Tartarian number was 15 minutes ago, or whatever they think, it's still petering out. And but see, all of these civilizations, the Greek, whatever, they all came through some sort of revelation. Right. And the revelation from, you just want to call it the divine that works, and all the principles are the same, right? The same architectural, the same quatrefoil, trifoil, all these things, are all the same to all these architects, whether it's Angkor Wat, or Mesoamerica. So what's next, is impossible to impose upon. It has to come from whatever the next revelation is. And I think the revelation is going to have to come after collapse.
Right.
That's at least that's the way these cycles of history, and they're always in four, the cycles of history go.
The book that really influenced me the most when I read it back in the 90s was Islamic Art and Spirituality. And the author's name is Syed Hossein Nasr, Nasr, who was a professor of at George Washington University? Religious studies, I guess. And that book changed the way I see. And it changed especially the way I see architecture. So a lot of times I would be driving to work and I'd pass it's like a shitty little gas station, just like a little cube, right, with cinder blocks. And I'd look at it and I'd say, okay, it's just not finished. I would look at it and say, well, it could be embellished. I could turn that into Monticello, just by adding a dome and bringing out a portico with columns, and then it would have dignity and uplift.
Right.
And a lot of buildings I look at that way, they look like Soviet bloc buildings to me, which kills the human spirit. And that's what I see a proliferation of. The housing units that they put up for people are horrendous. It just breaks my heart to see. But then I also turn it around and say, it could be an easy fix.
Right.
Because it's just, look at that. That's just the paper box, the cardboard box that it's structured upon.
It's the scaffolding. It's the scaffolding. It's the stage set. It doesn't have.
You could do biogeometry corrections on that.
Totally.
So you could do architectural, sacred architecture corrections that would uplift a lot of the ugly architecture that we're bludgeoned with, really.
Yeah.
Don't think that doesn't have an effect on your psyche and your well-being. That also dampens the human spirit, just as beneficial architecture raises the human spirit. So if you look at the difference experientially, when you walk into a big box store, how does your body feel and your spirit? And then you turn around and you walk into Cathedral of St. John the Divine or a mosque, the Blue Mosque in Istanbul. How do you feel in there? How do you feel when you walk into Shard Cathedral as opposed to walking into a bank?
Right.
So in the bank or the big box store, what is the predominating action? It's extraction. They are extracting from you. They want your money and they want your energy. But when you go into one of these sacred buildings, you walk out a foot higher spiritually. So in Shard Cathedral, when we were there for the workshop with Keith Critchlow, he explained to us that the way they set up the architecture in that building, there are three main arched doorways when you walk in. There's the main portico, and then there's the two side ones. If you go in the one on the right side and you circumambulate inside the cathedral and come out the left side, you're coming out a foot higher, not your body, but you're walking a foot higher than when you went in. and it works on the subtle body. And that's what all of this geometry is doing, is working on the subtle body, whether it's detrimental geometry with these box buildings, or whether it's a cathedral. And you can feel experientially, next time you're out in town, just stop the car and go into a beautiful cathedral or a church, and then go into a bank and just feel how your body experiences.
Oh, 100%. Government buildings and banks, nothing.
Extraction and compression.
It just depends on which way the trumpet is facing.
Okay, so what you were saying before, Steve, though, about like how like bringing the divine in. So we were talking about the quatrefoil in the group chat last month, which, by the way, we miss you guys at the group chats. But Marcy said, this other person that she and other people have recommended to, that I listened to before, this woman named Oracle Girl, like she's talking about constantly and obsessed with this idea of quadrality. And Marcy said, whenever she hears her talk about quadrality, she's thinking about me and the quatrefoil, and that these things are connected, right? So I went looking and trying to find, you know, some information about the quadrality, right? And what I found was really interesting. So I found like some sort of academic paper on it called The Rules of Quadrality, an excerpt from the Totality of God and the Izanomi Cross, Unlocking the Secret to the Riddle of the Ages, right? And so if you look at this is kind of their version of the quatrefoil, right? You got 1, 2, 3, 4, and you've got something emerging through the middle. And it also looks a lot like the Zia symbol, which is the New Mexico, right?
That's the traditional solar cross too. Yeah.
Okay, right, which is also like Templar's cross, the light photon coming in, the same kind of thing, right? And this is hard to understand. So this was a document prepared in 2001 that is sort of an excerpt from a bigger work of this person. So I started reading it. I'm like, this is going to take me a while. I'm not going to understand this in a day, a week, or a month, right? But what it basically is kind of, you can see that he breaks it down into sort of this idea here, right? That there's a spiritual realm and a physical realm, and then there's a spiritual model and a physical model, right? And that what we're talking about, so there's 4 things: spiritual realm, physical realm, spiritual model, physical model. Imagine each one of those were one of the lobes of the quatrefoil, right? Or one of the extensions of the arm on the Izanomi cross. And the middle space being like, you know, then reality, like what we experience as reality is how these things are interacting with each other, right? And in some cases, like in some iterations of reality, are more dominated by the physical, whether that be the realm dynamics or that of the physical model, the structural model. And then everything else sort of operates around that, right? And then in other iterations of reality, and I don't know when they're saying iterations of reality, they mean time periods or dimensions or just religious takes on the existing time space that we're in or whatnot, but that there's different ways to sort of understand this. And you can lead with the realm aspect, right? And it has to do with what the root plane, it's very complicated. But what it really felt like to me, it was describing was just like that there are multiple layers of reality, and to the extent that how differentiated from one another those are, I'm unclear on, but that some of them are more dominant towards the spiritual or the physical, and some of them have more of a realm quality or dynamic to them, and others have more of a model quality. And so that's making me think of the difference between the brutalist architecture and the beautiful cathedral, right? One has the feeling more of a realm, the other more of a, right? Right? Like one is dominated by spiritual principles, another by physical principles, though they both have some qualities of each in them. Right? Like it creates a certain scenario. So I thought that was interesting because of what you talked about. So this idea is like, this is how we're going to bring in sort of like the new, not like the new golden age, like some dumb, you know, new age kind of thing, right? But that if we're to bring back some of what you are talking about, or the new iteration of it, if we are to bring in the modern building that has the qualities that you and I discussed, then understanding quadrality and how the dynamics of this work are like the spiritual principle that that one would need to understand to have that in this time. Right.
Mhm.
So I thought that was interesting, and it's going to require, like, I'm going to have, there's some pretty high level concepts unpacked in the paper that I'm going to have to like read each paragraph multiple times to really be clear that I'm getting what I'm picking up what they're putting down.
Diagram the sentences.
Right. Diagram. Right. But when you said that about the divine, Steve, and that there's 4, right? Cycles of 4, there's a big part in this paper about the seasons and why the seasons are an example of this and blah, blah, blah. Right. And so this takes me back to the Ikebana, right? Like when you took your course, like what was explained to you as the reason why they do this?
Tomiko never explained it.
Ah.
She never got into the spiritual end. She just, in that particular way that Asian people have, they're not heavy into left brain, the why of things. They're more into the right brain, experiential. Just do it.
Interesting.
Just do it. And I remember one time in class, I had done an arrangement and it was okay, but she was so sweet. And well, here she is. I have this wonderful photo of her. She was such a sweet woman. She was a war bride. And she ended up living on Long Island, and that's how I took the classes. And so she would come along and she would look at your arrangement. Here it is, where we had she would have luncheons at restaurants.
Oh, look how cute you are.
Look at how adorable.
Right.
Back in the day. So she would look, and the first thing she would do would be compliment you. Oh, and she was sincere, she meant it. Oh, that's lovely. Clip, 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 snip, snip, snip. Or she'd pull one piece out, or she'd just move it 5 degrees. And you could feel internally, click, 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 something fell into place and it was perfect. And you know internally when the arrangement is right.
Yeah.
You can always do your arrangement, say, and you're fussing with it and you're fussing with it and you just can't get it right. And you know, but where is it not feeling right? It's not in your mind. It's your body sensorium is telling you it's not right.
Okay. So
I could feel it like right in the hara. I would feel it right here. When she did that, all of a sudden I got it. I was like, oh, wow. I feel it physically.
So it was kind of like with the experience with her was, this is what we do and this is how we do it. And you will know when you have done it right.
And she was so,
okay,
casual about it.
Yeah. And now she's reached the wash on, off moment.
But there was no, this is why we do it.
Not with Tomiko. Perhaps with other teachers, there would be.
Okay. So
but that just wasn't her bailiwick.
You know me, I always have to have a why, right? So,
I know, me too. I'm the same way.
Right. Well, that's why Krys dug into the books, and they gave her a little bit of the why.
okay. So what is your understanding of the why?
Selflessness.
Selflessness. Okay.
So when the ego comes into play, it makes a mess. You learn the techniques. You study the techniques, whether it's being a samurai warrior or an archer or a flower arranger. And actually, it was the priests in the temples and the samurai who were doing flower arranging in the beginning. It was not the householder.
I'm sure it wasn't. Yeah.
Right. So it was really a male activity in the beginning, and then later it morphed. But you would learn the techniques, and then you embody those techniques through repetition. Just like in chanting, you know, it's the repetition that makes the embodiment, right? So it's like the groove of a record.
You do it for selfless reasons. You do it without ego.
To the best of your ability, and you're very clumsy in that way in the beginning. But that comes with time. It's like burnishing gold, you know, you got the stone and you just keep rubbing, and it's over time that it's not, it's like they say, you don't rip the skin off a snake, it has to shed. So that's how it works with ego suppression. It has to dissolve and crackle and pixelate and fall apart.
Yep.
But it's a process.
So it's interesting to me that you said this samurai did it, right? Because you don't think of samurai as like flower arrangement.
That's why I wanted to bring it up.
But they didn't need scissors,
Right. They had their swords.
But if what we're dealing with is principles of like the manipulation on some, I don't know if manipulation, but like the bending of space and time, which is something you do think of with samurais, and the way they fight and the way they move through space and the way they wield their weapon and whatnot. If someone has the ability, right, that's a tremendous amount of power and responsibility. And if someone is not coming from a selfless place with that, you can have a mess, right? It's kind of like having
That's what we have today.
having Bill Gates fund the WHO or something.
Yeah, we have people with great talent and
Right.
fortitude, but they're destructive. What were you going to say?
Yeah, and you have really bad Ikebana teachers too.
Right.
Or I won't say really bad, but they have look at me arrangements like modern architecture.
Right.
Right.
Of course, that's going to.
I mean, what could be simpler than
human.
this, right?
Yeah, but I can see that. I can see the triangle. I can see this in there. I can see like where there is one that is kind of in the forefront and then one that is slightly behind it and another back to the side. And I can see how it is arranged in these shapes and designs that they see are important to their art, even though like,
You should take classes, Emily.
I should take one. I like flowers. I really do.
You should take, I'll bet you there's an Ikebana group in Austin.
I'm sure.
Anyway.
So let me tell you what I found. And I thought this was amazing. I loved this, right? So I went looking to find out like what the spiritual purpose of this was, right? And I found this really cool article here, right? Where creativity meets spirituality. But there was one, I liked the whole article, and I'll attach the article so people can read it. But there's one paragraph that I felt was the most important, and it said, Ikebana has a profound philosophical meaning aside from just the aesthetics.
Mhm.
It is a symbolic language to understand the spiritual significance of life. The cycle of seasons, time, birth, growth, decay, and revival is personified through it. It is a disciplined art where humanity, heaven, and nature are sewn together in sacred moments of silence, persistence, and dedication. And I thought that was really cool. And there was another sentence in the next paragraph that I liked as well, that was talking about, here, I'll just read this a little bit, the couple bits here. Each stem, flower, leaf, vase has a particular purpose, and bringing them together in a way that looks and feels perfect. So kind of what you said, no less than practicing Zen itself. It requires intuition, patience, quietness, understanding, love for nature, and passion in heart. And I love this part here. Empty spaces between two twigs have the same significance as the filled space, right?
Mm-hmm.
So now this, to me, this sounds like a very philosophical and artful way of saying some of the same things that this rules of quadrality is talking about in the totality of God. There's this one segment here where it's talking about the positive space and negative space, right? And that the one is not more important than the other, right? And so that is the space that is filled with something is not more important than that seems to be devoid of a something, right? And so when I was reading that paragraph, like when I look at this shape, when I look at this design, to me, this is about, for some reason in my own spirit, my own intuition, this is about dimensional travel. This is about time travel. And I don't know why I need it to be that. But for some reason, that's what my intuition like deeply believes that it is. And I like this saying because I felt like that paragraph that I read, right? Like it brought me to this place where like what this is saying here is beautiful too. And why isn't that enough for me, right? Like, why do I need it to be about something else other than that?
Good.
it also leaves the possibility, because it says that the negative space is no more important than the space that is filled, that is what it is, right? And so if that is what it is, it's beautiful. And if it's not what it is, that's beautiful too. If it really is just a shape that's about the process of life, death, coming and going, all of that kind of stuff in that sense, or if it really is this grander metaphysical sort of thing where you can literally, move between what we think of as defined reality and that which isn't, that's awesome. But like, I always feel like in my day-to-day life, I'm trying to balance these two things. Like I am trying to be here now and enjoy and appreciate this. And there's some part of me that so deeply feels that there's much, much more than this. And I want to know it, but not at the expense of missing this, right? So I'm constantly in this cycling process of those things. Go ahead.
So those narratives that you have, they're training wheels. So they are going to carry you until you don't need them anymore. And those narratives then will fall away. When you look at there's something unique about the Japanese arrangements because they're so spare.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay. So are you saying, okay, let me just make sure.
Wait. They're very spare. And one of the most difficult things for the new student is to cut away extraneous stems or leaves. Very, very difficult. I still have trouble with it. I'm getting better, but I'm watching while I'm doing it. And I realized at a certain point that what you're cutting away is excess verbiage. So if you see leaves as words, this was my own thing. I just nobody told me this, but and thoughts. If you see the leaves as words carrying thoughts, and if what your intention is to quiet the mind, what you're doing is you're getting rid of the extraneous, the training wheel narratives.
Okay.
They're fine to a point, but only to a point. They can only take you so far, and that's fine. But eventually, like when the child grows up a little bit and says, I have the strength now in my muscles to carry this bicycle, this vehicle, I can carry it, or it can be carried, take the I away, it can be carried by this momentum that has been built up with time. Those training wheels fall away. So you're cutting away certain branches and leaves, and it takes a while, but you get this embodiment that tells you, click, click, click. It feels right here. So you have the experiential knowing. You're not up in your head saying, I think this leaf should go. I think this leaf should go. No, it's like, feel this needs to go. Okay. So what you end up with then is something that is very quiet.
Minimalist.
Well, this is called Ikebana, when there's only one flower.
Okay.
And Ikebana is from the Japanese tea ceremony. So, and it's just one flower. And it's exquisite. So there's no chatter. That's how I see it. No one said that to me, that no one ever said, well, that's how it is. That's what it is. You get it experientially, and all of this verbiage falls away. And that's why I also have a thing about labels on jars and food, and especially on vegetables. It's constant chatter of the society, of the culture, pulling you away from the sacred center. And there's all this chatter constantly being assaulted. Every time I see a label on an avocado, I'm like, get it out of here. It's an assault.
Yeah, I agree.
That's what it is, right?
Yeah.
So is that helpful to see it in that way?
Well, a couple of things. So it made me think a couple of things. So like when, let's just say, okay, so let's just say that a kid, like you use the example of the bicycle and training wheels to a certain extent, but like what I was thinking is when a kid is little, they might want to learn to fly or to ride their bike.
Mm-hmm.
And they may be really motivated because they don't like their home and they want to fly away to some place where things are better. And that desire to go somewhere else is inspiration or narratives that encourage them to learn to fly. And eventually they realize that, oh, flying, there may or may not be some place to go, better or not to go, but flying is really cool. And so I don't need this story about why I need to learn to fly anymore, because now I can fly, and that's kind of the point, right? Sort of like that. And then it made me think, okay, when I had read, I couldn't remember if it was the same article or a different article I'd read about it. It was talking about minimalism, right? There's a few points here in her article where she's like, Ikebana teaches us to see wisdom in nature and much more. And there's a few points that are most important, and that is mindfulness, minimalism, peacefulness, and gratefulness. And to me, I was attracted to this part about minimalism, right? And it said that the creation comprises of least number of flowers interspersed between branches and leaves. The creation is lighter on the upper side and heavier in the lower part. Less speaks more is the original Eastern philosophy. If it's not arranged with minimalism that touches hearts, sure, it can be inspired, but it's not the authentic sacred form of the art, right? So I see what you're saying about all the narratives, all my stories are training wheels. Like I get that. And at a certain point, like if I figure out how to do it, I'll just be doing it, and I won't be needing all of these stories and explanations as to how or what.
You'll just live it.
Yeah, can I chime in?
Yeah.
So, yes, and so what, and it's not like, I'm living in this, mystic totality all the time, but when you are fully ensconced in the moment, and it's not like Eckhart Tolle, it's now, it's now, it's now, it's now, it's now, it's now, it's now. It's all of the worlds, all of the worlds are coexistent with this one.
Yes.
And co-temporal, because time, as you know, does not exist except as a creation, right? So thus, all the worlds, all the times exist. So the worlds that you get through with mushrooms. I had experiences after during an incubation that Hades and this world it's just a matter of shifting. Of changing the dial, and of course, most of the day we live in this idea that we have a solid world that's outside of us, which isn't true either. When you have to when the person in the article is talking about reality, well, what are that person's suppositions of reality? If reality only exists in your experience, that is what reality is, then that totality is present continuously. Right. And so, it's like Ibn Arabi had an experience when he was moving from Spain, east towards Damascus, and he was on the ship. He experienced what Henri Corbin would call the imaginal realms, right? Which is the dream realm, the other realms, what you see with the mushrooms, the geometry and everything. And he actually said that he had, and he saw his whole life planned out, and it did come out that way. But he said the imaginal realms became coexistent with this realm, as it always is, and he never lost that experience of it, and that would be to me like a true mystic life, where you're just plugged into all these things at the same time, because they all exist at the same time.
So what you're saying, I mean, yes. So what you're saying, like when I've had the experiences that have led me to believe that there's much, much more than what we normally think of, I'm not thinking about whether it's time travel or another dimension. It's just what's happening then. And then at some other time when I'm reflecting on it, it seems significantly different than what we're normally in. So then it becomes this thing that is like somewhere else or some time else that one wants to somehow figure out how to approach again. But when you're in it, it's exactly as you described, right? And when I'm tripping, if I eat mushrooms in my apartment, whatever I'm experiencing is right here in my apartment, even though like the next day I don't see it, it doesn't mean it isn't still there. Right.
Good.
So it's always here, and it's where we sort of tap into. And for some reason, I don't know if this is just our nature naturally, or if this is the effect of something that has happened or been done. We are constantly having to put something at a distance in order to try and understand it and then approach it, instead of just like being inside of it all the time or whatever it is. But, you know, I had an interesting conversation with Leslie Thorne. We were talking about schizophrenia. Schizophrenia keeps coming up over and over and over in conversations I have with people for a variety of reasons. But that's just everything everywhere all at once. There's that new movie too we saw, which I don't know if you've seen that yet, but it's an interesting movie. And that is how it is, right? Where everything is
the new movie.
Everything everywhere all at once.
Oh, that's
Okay.
the title. Okay.
Okay. And there's the usual sorts of like bullshit elements they have to add in order to put it out publicly, but it's pretty right on in terms of describing how the multiverse actually is. And it's exactly really what you said, Steve, right? Which is so funny, because each of us deep inside of, at least anybody who is reflective in any way and likes to talk about things, we all know this, and then we forget it. We keep trying to create like elaborate methods to attain it again. And like when we get it, we weren't trying to do it. The methods don't work, right? Like it just happens or it doesn't happen based on sort of.
It's called grace.
Right, but the attempt,
The state of grace.
just the attempt is important,
Yes.
even if it doesn't work, I think.
Right. So, but yeah, no, I'm with you on that sort of completely. And I find that like I have had times in my life where it's more like that more of the time, and other times where it's not. And I think it has to do with exactly what you're saying, which is that being in the moment, right? When we're more worried about that which has already happened or that which is coming up or might happen, then we're not as able to experience that, the psychedelic nature of everything happening all at once, because we're thinking about one particular thing that is in the distance, either spatially or temporally, backwards or forwards. And that sort of cancels out all the other realities that are coexisting, because you're just focused on that one, right? And so you're like, for me, it's constantly in this push-pull, because we live in this reality that says, if you're a responsible adult that plans for your future, or that thinks ahead, or that does all of these things that we have decided is what qualifies you to be, you know, whatever, right? Then that takes you out of that other thing, which is everything all at once, right? Everything right here, right now, all at once happening, and just sort of enjoying the chaos of that. You know, when it's difficult to be in this reality, right? Where like, you know, we all know people who are that, like, do that all the time, and it just feels like they're chaotic and irresponsible.
I have noticed in my own life that in retrospect, I've noticed that things work best for me if I don't try to grab them and make them happen.
Yes.
But if I just say yes or no to whatever comes into my experience, so I don't go out and say, I'm going to go get a PhD, I'm going to do that, I'm going to conquer the world, I'm going to do this, that. An experience or an opportunity comes along, is presented, and it will feel right or not. And I'll either say yes or no. And that has worked so well, but it was not a conscious path for me. I just noticed it in retrospect, now having lived.
I think you call it not getting too far ahead of yourself, right?
I guess.
Well, this is the Jacob Lieberman thing, right? Where he unconsciously engages in the exercise every once in a while of just doing the next thing that grabs his attention. He doesn't have any plots or plans about how he's going to spend his day. He goes outside.
She's the mistress of that methodology.
He goes outside and he just does the next thing that presents itself to be done. And he'll do, when he does it, he tries to do it for the whole week or the whole day or whatever. If he sees a piece of trash, he picks it up and throws it away. While he's throwing it away, there's a butterfly. He follows the butterfly to the garden that it goes to.
It's my life.
Garden, he did it right, like that kind of thing. And it sounds like, okay, that doesn't sound so hard to do, but whatever the fuck has been done to the human race, whether we've done it to ourselves or something else has done it to us, that has become one of the most challenging activities a person can engage in, is just the next thing that presents itself.
Really?
Right. As the Sufis consider themselves the sons or daughters of the moment. So the moment will always present the thing to do.
Yep. All right. Anything else you want to say about Ikebana? Since we kind of went all over the place with it, but it is the jumping off point. So I want
there was one word that seemed to have a hook for me was minimalist. And I think that, I don't know if I'm right about this, but I feel like that's a psychological term. And in the 20th century and the 21st century now, I think psychology has inserted itself into spirituality. And I think it's good to keep those languages separated. So I'm a traditionalist. I like to use the traditional terms that are clean and have been past the test of time, because I think that I've seen the ravages that psychology can do to people. So I like to keep those words separated. You can use minimalist if you want to decorate your house, but when you're talking about spiritual practices, it's just me. I would say I would use the traditional word.
Which would be what?
What would be the traditional word? I don't know. Can you think of a word that would encompass?
I might in a minute.
No, I can't think of an actual word.
I understand.
But maybe it's more of an attentive thing that.
So I understand what you're saying, and I'm of two minds about both what you said and about the idea of minimalism, right? So the way that of course, like the first time I noticed modern architecture or something like that, which is probably like in the 80s, right? I was like, oh, there's less stuff, right? Like, and so I guess that sort of enters the idea of minimalism in. And then in the early to mid 2000s, there was a style of techno that became very popular called minimal, and I really didn't like it. Like the first time I heard it, I thought it was interesting because the first person I heard it used it as like the way you do something sort of opposing to highlight the other thing, right? Like you do something that's different than what you were just doing, and then you go back to what you were just doing to sort of show the difference. And he was like very, very gifted at the way he used minimal techno. And then it became a trend and everyone was doing it and they did a terrible job of it, like always happens with these things. So that turned me off to the idea of minimalism in general, right? But as I've gotten older and I've had some experiences, I like having less things more and more because it sort of less shit in my house, less shit in my mind, sort of easier to deal with things. So I started appreciating it from that perspective. But also I began to understand that part of the purpose of minimalism, both in the music and some of these other things, is appreciation of the negative space.
Good.
Right? Like it's the space between the sounds. And in minimal music, there's more space than there is sounds. And that space is time for your own mind to wander, right? That's like the spiritual time in between the imposed, like it's like having columns, right? Like there's like two walls and the space is what you fill it with, right? And so that, and then I had this weird trip one time, like for some reason, like the inner architecture of a lot of my trips are like mid-century modern architecture, which I consider to be fairly minimalist, right? And one time it was like, I saw all my grandma's Asian shit sitting on the sort of shelves of the mid-century modern architecture I was seeing in my mind. And I was like, oh, I had never really considered like the Asian art to be like, really that it went with mid-century modern, but it looked fucking amazing. I'm like, whatever this shit I saw in my mind, it's like when you look at those
shaker furniture,
those temples, right? It was like, oh my God, this looks amazing. I want my house to look like that. There's no one out there doing anything like that. And it showed me how those things go together. And I think the binding principle was minimalism. And I don't think that's a psychological thing, right? I think that is a way some things are highlight. It's the way you use negative space to highlight like a singular important concept, right? Like you want to show how important something is. And so you pull everything else back.
Yes. It's like cutting the leaves off the branch.
Right, exactly, right? And I don't see that as a psychological term. However, I see how they have weaponized the highly spiritual use of the idea of minimalism and turned that into like this, you shouldn't care about very many things kind of.
Right.
Talking about the psychology.
Right, because you're not going to need them in the next iteration that they want to enforce upon us.
Right, that kind of. So I see what you're saying, and I think it's like rather than it doesn't belong there. It's been weaponized and distorted and presented in a completely different way. And if it were presented in its holistic way, I could see how it would be very relevant and beautiful use in both realms, right? So anywho, but I like the way you wound that back.
Yeah, I actually saw Philip Glass's Einstein and the Beach at which is like the epitome of minimalistic art, music.
Yep.
And I saw it at Brooklyn Academy of Music
Philip Glass
before we got together. Yeah. And it was 5 hours long, no breaks.
Nope.
And it was, I can sum it up like this. For about an hour. And then someone comes on stage and starts going, 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, 2, you know, and there's that. And then this beaker would move like incredibly slowly across the stage. Right. And it was, you know, at the time it was considered like the epitome of art, and everybody was clamoring over each other to see it. Anyway, I'm glad to have had seen it. Would never
see it again.
Things you only do once.
But you know, yeah, that was what I just want to add one more thing and before we close, getting back to the Ikebana, the head of the school that Krys studied under, her teacher Tomiko, was a student of the founder of the school,
Hiroshi
Teshigahara, and he did 2 art house movies back in the 70s. Well, one in the 70s, one in the 90s, I think. So one is called Woman of the Dunes, which is this classic art house movie, is crazy movie. And it's just like this house with a woman and this other guy, and these dunes just keep on coming in. He keeps on shoveling it out. Very existential.
The sand.
But the other one he did was called Rikyu, and that's a magnificent movie. And that's about the monk in the 1500s who elevated the tea ceremony to a Zen art. And he was also an Ikebana specialist. And the opening scene, Rikyu, anybody can find it. I hope it's still around somewhere. I know we have it on DVD because he bought it a long time ago. Spectacular movie on the tea ceremony.
And you really should have all the lights off in the room, and just the screen showing in the opening scene is so amazing.
All right.
Just quiet yourself down.
It's a great
and
film.
Observe the opening scene. Then you put the lights on if you want to.
For the people who are more interested in the Ikebana, I'm going to link to a video that Krys did where she demonstrated doing the arrangement.
I did a workshop.
All that
full on. It's got the history, the whole trajectory, and how to do it.
So that will be linked in the description box below. We're going to move over into the patrons segment and just kind of have like a family chat, catch up. You know, I haven't gotten a chance to talk to you guys as much as I normally do for quite a bit now. And we're just going to kind of catch up on what's going on in the world, what's going on for each of us, how we see things, blah, blah, blah. But before we go, let people know where they can find you, how they can support you. I know the publishing company is doing pretty well right now, got some interesting things going on. So let us know.
Yep, we're very busy. The 2 newest books we have out are, the first one is called Walking with Aletheia. Aletheia is the Greek goddess of truth, and it's by Jean Hargadon Wayner. And this is a book about her recovering, important to say, recovering from decades of abuse from her great uncle and from her Catholic high school, the priest in her Catholic high school, who actually just had this ring of women that he was abusing, you know, kind of similar to the guy in the gymnastics, and it was whatever his name is.
Very nice.
And there was,
but it was about her recovery and her interesting, you know, methods of doing that.
But I would also say that there is an attendant Netflix series called The Keepers. And it features Jean starting in the 2nd episode. It's 7 episodes, and it goes through the entire experience of what she had, but also how her teacher, Sister Kathy, was murdered, they think, by this priest. And it's still an unsolved murder and an active open case. So I would recommend watching that series. Emily, I think you did get to see it.
The series was great, and that became the subject of one of my episodes of Project Kids. with Michael. So if you guys go back a
Oh,
few
good.
episodes back,
I think we did watch that one.
how
Yeah.
many secrets does Baltimore keep? Yeah.
Right. The
Yeah.
whole Baltimore thing was wild.
Yeah.
All right. So this is also a book we just published called
False
False
Messiah.
Messiah by Peter Lamborn Wilson. It's esoteric essays on esoteric Christianity, and including Jesus as mushroom.
Yeah.
Okay, these are medieval woodcuts
Yeah.
that have everyone.
I'm not going to argue with that. I'm not going to argue.
And also, Jesus and the Poison Grail, and there's a lot of just things that no one else talks about
And
in
what
there. That's a
about
great book.
In the works? What's in the works? With
We got a bunch of things in the
Elisa?
works. We got we're republishing Elisa E's work. I just got that, so I'm just starting it.
just got the
re-edit.
manuscripts.
She combined those two books,
what's
My
the
Life
title?
in MK Ultra, Then and Now is what she's calling it.
So
So
her books were called Our Life Beyond MK Ultra 1 and 2.
Our Life, exactly.
Redoing it, and I'm so glad you guys hit it off and were able
Yeah.
to sort this
Yeah.
out. I know she's delighted. She was so excited when she saw that book with Jean's book.
Oh, was she?
Well, that was, I mean,
Oh,
what you guys told me about that, I watched The Keepers, and she had been looking for someone to publish her, to do this with. And so I showed her your book and I told her to go watch the series. And then she looked at that. She's like, yes, I definitely want to work with them.
oh,
whatever.
great. Thank
So
you, Emily.
Good.
Been-
Thank you for that.
Yes, so
Yeah.
thanks for the connection. And the other one we have in the works is by a woman named Marian Heinem, who is doing a book on the whole George Floyd
You
fiasco.
mean Miriam Hanane? I know Miriam.
Yeah. Yes, I
Do
think
you?
you do. Yes.
You might
I
want to
know.
interview
Yeah, she's been on
her.
my show before.
Well, she
Yeah.
needs help getting the word out to raise money. So maybe you could interview her.
So we're
again.
doing.
I've
yeah,
interviewed her before. Yeah.
Yeah,
She's
so we're doing. What's that?
she and Danny are good friends. And that's how I met,
Oh, right,
interviewed Miriam.
right.
Who was a
Right,
friend.
I did talk to Danny briefly. Anyway, so we're looking to do her book. Both these books will be probably towards the fall, end of the year. My book also probably around the same time. And but if that plus Elisa's book and everything, if that doesn't point, blinking neon arrows at Logo Sophia, I don't
All
know
right.
what we know.
All right, guys. We'll see you on the other side. If you want to join us for the family chat, patreon.com/offplanetmedia, emilymoyer.locals.com, or now rockfin.com/Emily Moyer. We will see you on the other side.
Thank you, Emily.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Yep.